Hello and welcome in our headquarters in Kiev. This is Hromadske International, a program in English about Ukraine and Eastern Europe. My name is Volodymyr Yermolenko. We'll be talking today, as usual, about current events in Ukraine and around Ukraine. Before we start, let me remind you that you can follow us on Twitter and on Facebook, Hromadske International, to be in line with the developments in Ukraine. We're covering very often, of course, now the pre-election Ukraine, what is happening around the upcoming presidential and parliamentary election. But today our topic is different. A few days ago, on 31st of January, the Supervisory Board of National Public Broadcasters sacked the head of board of this public broadcaster, Zurab Alasania, in a move which raised brows around Ukraine and in Ukraine, of course, among many media experts, many media professionals. Today we're talking about this, what has happened and to which consequences it can lead. I'm very glad to welcome our guest here is Yevhen Hlibovitsky, the member of the Supervisory Board of National Broadcaster, and we have two media experts, Roman Shutov and Igor Roskladai. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here. My first question, let's try to explain to our international audiences, to our international viewers, what happened 2 days ago. Yevhen.
I think 2 days ago there was an attempt to stall one of the successful reforms in Ukraine. What happened was not about a particular person. It was about the process that started in 2014 when public service broadcast was legalized in Ukraine. Then it took 3 years after that to transform the state TV and state radio into public TV and public radio. Then the Supervisory Board, which is an independent board that consists of representatives of the parliament and of the civil society, which is a novelty for many European countries, basically, in a very unexpected vote for many political observers, appointed an independent head of managing board. And that basically gave the beginning of dynamics for reform. The public service broadcast is politically independent. It's proven by various monitoring processes. It's slowly becoming more and more influential. It gains audience. It gains the momentum. So the first signs, when the first signs of success started showing, the first thing that the political coalition did, the parliamentary coalition did, supported by various fractions of the opposition, probably with the exception of Samopomich, they cut the budget of public service broadcast roughly in half. So in 2018, the public service broadcast was underfinanced very, very significantly.
So we can talk about a little bit kind of financial pressure from the government, from the parliament.
Basically, yes. And then they continued it this year. So basically, public service broadcast got less money, roughly about 45% less money than was advised by the Council of Europe, then was actually prescribed by the law, which has been passed by the Ukrainian parliament.
Sorry to interrupt. Let us talk a little bit more generally about the role of the public broadcaster. What was the difference compared to the state-owned television, which we used to in Ukraine, like before 2014? Roman.
Before 2014, we had a huge state-owned system of television and radio broadcasters. And there were three TV channels that broadcast all over Ukraine, and we had 26 regional broadcasters that were paid by the government, that were in fact controlled by the government. And they this is normal, unfortunately, for Ukrainian practice, that they were a mouthpiece of propaganda of the government. It's not kind of propaganda, but it was just to promote the interests of local elites, of local governors. If this is about elections, so this was kind of agitation among the audiences to
And
vote
elites
for
used it very much. There was always a fight for the thing who is controlling the public, the state.
Exactly, and as soon as public broadcaster appeared and it was registered, so finally both government and local government, they lost their media assets. So you can imagine the resistance that this reform faced from many of people who sit in the authority cabinets. However, due to pressure from civil society, due to pressure from international partners, and due to pressure from really democratic politicians, the reform finally started. And what now we have? We have the situation when the person who was one of the most powerful locomotives of the reform is fired.
Let's talk about this personality, Zurab Alasania. How would you describe him, Igor?
He's Georgian. Originally, he's from Georgia, and his character, what he do, he's very emotional, but he's very like a locomotive, like steam locomotive, which push something. And in this case, he pushed and broke the wall of this resistance from different. First of all, it's staff, because first people who was against reform, it was all the staff. At the very beginning of reform in 2014, we have 10,000 people working in the system of state broadcasting. It's a small town in Ukraine. And when you have...
And every branch was producing its own content, which was not that popular.
It was not only producing. Sometimes content was used, for example, by hidden payments. Like you have very brilliant program on agriculture, something like producing of wine and so on. But then you see these signs that this is a representative of such company Ltd. Or in another region you see, for example, in Lviv, religious programs on like advertisement. It's also paid by money. It was really corruption. It's like hidden corruption when you have some small payments, you have some relations with locals. And nobody cares about standards. Nobody cares about that. It's really important.
Did Alasania break really this vicious circle?
I think it's a very complicated question, because still the main problem and the main maybe aggression outside of company is that public service broadcasting still don't produce like content like BBC content. But we need to understand that to change system which is underfinanced, which equipment sometimes came from early to millennium. Yes, we need to invest to have some product, because television is very expensive material. And we see now a really good example in regions. Regional news, it's one of the first stage, and was a really brilliant example how PSB could operate on this very complicated political commercial market.
So this personality. Let me stop with this, if I could jump in on the leadership issue, because I think it's important. Zurab Alasania is an outlier. He is not a guy from the system. Yep. He is the guy from outside the system. Okay. He rides Harley. He wears a leather jacket. He has got huge tattoo.
He was in the French Legion.
He is the guy that you would not imagine in the corridors of power. He's not this type of guy. Actually, when he was appointed, one of the things that I remember clearly this thought that, do they really understand what they're doing? Because once he's in, he will not give in. And he is, I think what he's been doing is he's been crashing the ice. Mm-hmm. My question was, is that doable to transform the state television into public? From my point of view, it wasn't. I believed that we should start, from scratch, that we should just, privatize, sell, close, whatever, the old state TV. And
but the choice was already taken.
The choice was taken. He's done it. Mm-hmm. He's rough. Many people criticize him for being very rough in decision making and rough in management style, but he got these things done. And I think the fact that he represents a different kind of managerial culture, different type of political culture, was something that really cautioned the political elites. And this was one of the reasons why, at a certain point, the pressure mounted and critical mass of political elites came to the consensus that he should be fired, because otherwise he will really make that independent.
Let's have a look at a remark that made by Zurab Alasania just after this happened, 2 days ago, after there was a decision about his being sacked. Let's have a look.
In reality, the decision has still not been executed. I think it might be on February the 4th. For the past 2 years, all meetings or sessions with the Supervisory Board have been taking place in this way. They all conducted in a very negative way, full of hatred. I don't know why, it just came to be like this. Nobody has respect for each other. They blame us that we don't respect them, and we complain about their behavior because of the way they talk to us, the managers who were hired for these positions, and we shouldn't tolerate behavior like this. But that's how it is. It didn't come as complete surprise, as in, ooh, something scary is about to happen. We've always had salary bonuses, but when we had a crisis, we didn't pay those to anyone. 300 people had to take unpaid vacations. Any suggestion that some people were paid and some weren't is completely made up. These are money issues, and people will always be curious about other people's finances.
This was a comment by Zurab Alasania, the leading personality of public broadcaster, who was sacked a few days ago, but the story is not over, so we are following it. Let's discuss what happened on 21st of January. There was lots of questions about the procedural issues. Was this meeting organized properly, or if not, what happened? Johanna, you're the member of the
I'm the member of
board.
the Supervisory Board, so
you can tell us from the inside.
This is the regular meeting of the Supervisory Board. Roughly, the Supervisory Board meets every month. There's a number of issues on the agenda. There's a number of documents that have to be reviewed. There's a number of documents that have to be passed in time in order for other wheels of this whole bureaucratic machine to work. So this was a regular meeting, nothing special about that meeting, except maybe for the fact that this was the first meeting of the year. So usually the agenda is slightly bigger on the first meeting of the year than
and the agenda included the report for the.
It has the report. It has the financial. It has a number of reports. It also has some other more operational, or I would say strategically operational issues.
But the issue of sacking Alasania was not on the agenda.
No. And what happened in the middle of the meeting, that ad hoc, one of the members of the Supervisory Board offered to set this question on the agenda right away. The Supervisory Board voted for it. Then another member of the Supervisory Board advised that the Supervisory Board goes into a closed hearing, into a session. So everyone had to leave. There was no live coverage. There was, everything was turned off. Then they basically had a very short discussion about whether Zurab Alasania has to be sacked or not. And one of the members of the Supervisory Board unexpectedly already had everything prepared for the voting, and then they took the secret ballot. Basically, the secret ballot is required by the law only when the head of the managing board is elected, not when he is sacked. And so everything was done in a very secretive manner. There was a clear violation of the law because the law clearly states that there is a number of reasons why the Supervisory Board can oust head of managerial board. So once there is a decision to sack the head of the managerial board, obviously one of the reasons has to be stated why that happened. well, this was neither part of the discussion as far as members of the supervisory board can explain, nor it was clearly told to the public. So basically, we're talking about likes or dislikes. So the members of the supervisory board took discretionary decision. Basically, it was their arbitration. It was an arbitrary decision. They said, okay, we don't like the guy, let's sack him. So they did. As a result, me and another member of the supervisory board who were against this decision, we clearly said that we will go to the court with this because there's a clear violation of the
Let's talk about consequences a little bit later. Let me ask Igor, you're a media lawyer, how would you comment the situation from the law perspective?
I verified regulation on supervisory board. It's a document passed on the law by State Committee on TV and Radio in 2016, I believe. And it's a prescribed procedure how supervisory board must operate on their decision, how they must prepare regular or ad hoc meetings. And in this case, I found 4 violations, at least. First, agenda and decisions that some part of the meeting must be closed must be passed on the beginning. There is no other way to pass it inside, in the middle.
During the meeting.
In the middle of the meeting, yes. Second, if they want to, we have now this photo of this draft of this decision, and we see reasons that they used 7.5.2 paragraph of the contract with the head of the board. It states it must be a huge violation. If you have huge violation, you have special procedure for it. That first you must found it. It must be decision of supervisory board that they found something which they think that it's huge violation. Then they must send a request to the head of the board to give explanations, to give some answers on this situation. And only after that, they must turn back and pass some decision to find violation or not find violation, and after that, to pass a decision on this meeting or next meeting. And in this case, if they use this point, sorry, you violate your own rules. And in this case, my question about you violate requirements for the member of supervisory board. Because one of the requirements, you must operate in favor of a company, in favor of trust to company, and you must operate under the law and other procedures. If you violate procedures, my question, first of all, of this person, and I can say that it's a member of COSAC. It's one very interesting guy because...
Let's talk about these political affiliations later. Just to inform our audience, is that those who are backing the sacking of Mr. Alasania, they're not really disclosing their reasons. They're saying that there is a protocol, there is a process of finalizing the protocol. And we, by the way, invited them to this discussion, Mr. Alexei Panich, who is one of the members, and who is opponent of Alasania, very publicly open opponent, and Mr. Tiana Lebedev, who is the head of the supervisory board. Their argument is that the process is not yet finalized, so we are waiting for details next week.
You see, the thing with the protocol is that the protocol can only contain something that was part of the session of the supervisory board. And if you have to wait for the protocol to find out what actually they voted for, then it's a clear sign that there's something wrong with this decision.
Let's talk about these political issues because it's very important. Yevhen mentioned this, one of the members, who is Mr. Kozak, who is mentioned by Igor. My question to Roman, because there is lots of discussion that there can be political reasons behind it, that there can be a sign for censorship. There is a movement, journalist movement just launched after that, who is called Movement 34, after the Article 34 of the Constitution. How would you estimate the political implications of it? Is there any political implication? Who is interested?
If you look back and recall what the events that preceded this situation like this, we can remember first what's the supervisory board and why we are talking so much about it. Supervisory Board is a collective body that consists of people who 50% elected by the civil society representatives, and another part is appointed by the parliament, by the parliamentary factions. So this means that part of the Supervisory Board is in one way or another connected with the political parties. Another part of the Supervisory Board is connected to civil society. And when Zurab Alasania was being appointed, there was no huge majority and a single decision that, we want him to be our leader. No, there was huge debate because the people appointed by the political parties, they were aware of what kind of person he was. And he was aware of the fact that the public broadcaster will never serve the government, and the local broadcaster will never serve local governments, and that's why they did not support this decision. And there was not a huge majority of voters that appointed him. And during all the term of Zurab Alasania, there were many attempts to destabilize the situation, to raise the issue of he should be fired and so on. But all these crises, other members of Supervisory Board, they managed to deal with them.
Okay, but we understand that political elites are not really interested in having person like Alasania. But the question is, can we personalize these political elites? Can we say, for example, this is Poroshenko? Because of the election, we have election in 2 months.
No,
or
we cannot.
We should talk about more generally political classes sides.
You see,
different parties.
Both the political coalition, including the pro-Poroshenko parties and Poroshenko himself, the political opposition with their leaders as well. As I said, probably Samopomych is the only exception, though it's easy to be an exception in the state where they are. They actually have never been in a position when they had to answer for their declarations with regard to this. There is a consensus in the political elites that public service broadcast is dangerous
and should serve them.
Is dangerous for the old ways. And what we see is that the country is slowly transforming from the old ways into the new ways. So public service broadcast is one of the anchors of the transformation that basically rips apart the traditional ways of governance. Why? Well, now, why the particular person is so important is, as for instance, head of the managing board of the public service broadcast, is because while the institutions are only formed, they're weak. And at this point, if you want to disrupt the process of reform, it's very easy to do this by targeting a leadership in this reform. And this is exactly what the political opponents did. So now it's going to be the question whether the strength of the civil society will be sufficient, whether the pressure from the Western partners who will be saying that, look, we see what you're doing, who will be putting through their messages to the government, will be sufficient. And another thing which will be important is we will see how the courts will work. We will see if the courts, because I will be filing the appeal. There are going to be other people who will be doing the same. We will see how the courts protect the law.
Let's talk about the future later, because there is a huge part of our discussion. We are talking about the Supervisory Board, and we have Yevhen Hlibovitsky here, but we also have 2 other members of the Supervisory Board who gave us comments. The opponents and the backers of Zurab Alasania, let's first hear the backer, Ms. Svetlana Ostapa, who is Deputy Director of Detector Media, one of the media NGOs, but also one of the members of Supervisory Board of National Public Broadcaster.
My colleague on the Supervisory Board, Vyacheslav Kozak, proposed to put the question of no confidence in Zurab Alasania and the early termination of his contract on agenda again. He had put it on the agenda a few times before, but it couldn't get enough votes to get it through. And now it got the support it needed. Kozak explained his motives, gave reasons for it. His colleagues also expressed what they didn't like. However, we agreed that this will be on the record because this issue, was discussed in a closed session, and Zurab was there, so we decided that this would be written in the protocol. It will be specific, so you will be able to get acquainted with the specifics, the specifically noted reasons which are connected to this. Zurab will still manage the organization until we elect the new head. The Supervisory Board now has to announce a contest for its head position. Then the head will carry out elections for new members on the management team. But before this happens, they are acting staff and need to perform their duties.
This was Svetlana Ostap, one of the members of Supervisory Board of Public Broadcaster. We're talking about these positive sides of Zurab Alasania, but there is so many criticism around him, and we see this criticism also from other members of the Supervisory Board. And one of the questions I would like to raise, there was 9 votes against 3. So we have a huge majority, if we can say that, in the Supervisory Board. One of those who are opponents of Zurab Alasania, the old-style Ukrainian politician Volodymyr Yavorivsky, that's what he said.
We were hoping that Suspilne, the national broadcaster, would finally be completely independent from the government, the way Hromadske is. That we would finally have a new channel, unlike those channels belonging to oligarchs. I voted for this law in the past, and I was hopeful for it. But unfortunately, all these expectations from the society haven't been fulfilled to this day. It's just another channel, not much different from the rest. That's just my opinion. But I didn't hear talks about Alasania's dismissal, and then suddenly the Commission announces about a charity foundation that helps to fund the channel, because it was always underfinanced. They list this as well as other reasons, and they raise this question. I'll tell you honestly, I didn't think it would happen. I thought it would be another signal to Alasania that something needs to change, that they shouldn't make up salary bonuses for themselves like they did in the past, when the ordinary journalists were receiving kopecks.
We are back now in Sunday show, Hromadske International. We're talking about the situation around Ukrainian public broadcaster, Yevhen Libovitsky, Roman Shutov, Igor Roskladai. We continue our debate, and we just watched the remark of Volodymyr Yavorivsky, who is an opponent of Zurab Alasania. He is not alone in Ukraine to criticize this new public broadcaster. There are several lines of criticism. The managerial, one of the criticisms is that there is a financial abuse, and the other is that there is depolitization of public broadcaster, that it doesn't cover really political events. How would you react to this criticism, Roman?
To tell the truth, every single step that Zurab Alasania did on his position was criticized. And nevertheless, many things he finally pushed, and many things are quite effectively working now. He transformed the system of local broadcasters, and the system now demonstrates that it is effective. It transformed the system, how the news are produced, and now the monitoring demonstrates that the news are really one of the most kind of balanced news in Ukraine. However, there was one real correct point that I think that those people criticizing him are quite correct in it. This is that being afraid of being biased in political reporting, the public broadcaster really refused to report about politics. And this is perhaps not a best solution. However, understanding the situation when the public broadcaster was criticized from every side, so such was a decision of the governor of Zurab and.
So instead of being kind of a PR of government, public broadcaster just tried to depoliticize itself.
They removed from the political issues completely, and even sometimes
not completely,
but not completely,
to a great extent.
Yeah. So it's another extreme. And it didn't make the public broadcaster a voice in this public political debate.
And instead of being a source of neutral and balanced news about the political process in Ukraine, so public broadcaster appeared not so to say poor source of information. However, this is question if it was enough to fire this person and if there's enough reason to undermine the reform itself.
Igor, what's your attitude to this criticism?
I think we have a much more complicated situation. No, first of all, I was shocked that Mr. Yavorivsky telling about public broadcasting for one channel. It's one of the huge manipulations that one channel takes so much money, but we forgot that we're talking about near 50 channels and digital platform, and radio, TV, regional broadcasting, and that's why it's one of the first manipulation and one of the first source of criticism for Alasania that you give so many money and you do not change content. But the people do forgot that we have quite bigger than one channel. Second, I can agree and disagree in the same time about political agenda. For one side, we have a lot of very critical investigation program, and they are really tough. And it's one of the source of the conflict with president, because of course president not happy about this. From another side, we have cases when we have no consensus in society. When we're talking, for example, about this event when president with a lot of priests going on the streets, is it the case to show in
to have a live broadcast
to live for 2-3 hours, or we need to cut some minutes, or we need to have some maybe discussion with the experts? And it's a case which I think we have no consensus in general.
There is a hot debate. Yeah.
It's a hot debate topics, because some people say, sorry, Thomas, we really, how much time you can talk about this Thomas? We have corruption, and you talking about Thomas.
Thomas is autocephaly of Ukrainian churches.
Other people saying, sorry, it's a part of independence of Ukraine. As I'm saying, I'm agnostic, but I'm agnostic of Ukrainian church. Yeah, it's one of the very popular now phrase in Ukraine. And we have a lot of issues in society which we have no consensus in general. And that's why, of course, public service broadcasting, when they trying to show or not to show something, they automatically became a part of one part of society and against another part of society. And I think one of the cases which public broadcaster in the near future must start to discuss about these topics, discuss in different platforms, in different regions, that we are really multinational, multicultural country, and we need to find some solution how to deal with these topics. How to cover them, how to debate with them, how to maybe not to cover. And even this, one of the cases was on this meeting about this musical band Hromadske against viruses, which is really
very provocative, very interesting.
Yes, but sorry, a lot of people was really happy that such content appeared on the public broadcasting, because it's something very new for this old Soviet-style machine.
I would say that what happened is a very entrepreneurial person, which Zurab, is on top of the corporation. And when you have someone entrepreneurial on top of the corporation, clashes happen. Because what entrepreneurial person does is swiftly changes decisions. If something doesn't work, that instead of letting the entire cycle go, he would, for instance, disrupt processes. So I would put it this way. Václav Havel, the former president of Czech Republic, once famously said that it's better to have 5 years of mistakes than 50 years of sabotage. And this is exactly what Zurab Alasania is. He's doing his honest mistakes. He's trying to change the system in good faith. And what we got is a flash from the reaction from the old system, which is trying to take him down.
But look, we can voice some other criticism. I mean, some journalists are leaving the public broadcaster. They're saying that still the managerial structure is not ideal, that there is a huge divide between top salaries and salaries of ordinary journalists, that the content is changing not so quickly, that there is huge disparity between different regional branches, etc., etc. So this is kind of a criticism that we hear.
I would contradict that. The difference between the lowest and the highest salary in the corporation where 3,500 people work and that has a number of managerial layers, is less than 10 times, which is actually a more equal system than any of similar corporations if you look across the board internationally. The highest salaries are quite modest. I would claim that Zurab Alasania is probably the least paid head of public service broadcast in Europe. Yes, people are leaving, and it's a pity. And part of these reasons is because of managerial mistakes, and some of the reasons are conflicts. Other things are happening. But one of the things that I see as a big part of the reasoning behind people leaving is expectation that changes will happen faster than they are actually happening. And some of them are really ready to put themselves into the semi-volunteer kind of work with low pay, with long hours for several months, maybe half a year, maybe a year. But when you see that the public service broadcast is notoriously underfinanced for the second consecutive year, and it doesn't look like something's going to change later, people are making their career decisions, and they're saying, okay, we'll go in private sector, we're going to find alternative career, we're going to do something else, and you can't judge them for that. So yes, public service broadcast has its losses, but at the same time, it's trying to stay on the track of development.
Let's talk about the future. What to do in this situation? What is your forecast? Because it's not the first time when Zurab Alasania is leaving the public broadcaster. What to do and what will be with the institution? Because can we say that the whole institution of public broadcaster is under threat? Roman?
For me, the most dangerous thing is loss of trust, because before this case there were two persons, and one person and one institution trusted by civil society and by donors. I mean Zurab Alasania and Supervisory Board, because Zurab Alasania is a locomotive man and mission-driven locomotive man, and Supervisory Board that really ensures that the broadcaster is politically neutral and it really follows the standards of best journalism and have no biases. So what happened recently? The Supervisory Board demonstrated that it is possible that it may be biased. It is capable. It is able to make something not transparent and not fair. And if finally we will really leave the locomotive man, so I'm afraid that no trust will be there to public broadcaster, and I don't know what will be the decision of donors and civil society that cooperate with and support public broadcasting. I'm afraid that without such support, the public broadcasting will disappear and will become the ordinary pro-government TV channel and set network of TV channels and radio broadcasters that's just controlled by government and serve it.
What is the solution to end this term of Supervisory Board, to restart the process, to bring them together again? But it's difficult because it's obvious there is a conflict inside.
I think that we have a different timeline for different steps. First steps, of course, it's a first milestone. It's this protocol, which must show what was the
We're
reason.
expecting next week.
Yeah, it must be not later than Thursday. But to my mind, I think that at least initiator of this issue must be resigned. Resigned by himself.
You mean Mr. Kozak?
Mr. Kozak. I think that he violated, and as I totally agree that the most dangerous thing now happened is the lack of trust. Because, some people agree with policy of Zurab, some disagree, but if you want to resign him, be as much transparent as possible. But as it was totally closed, as nobody can explain that, this reason must be prepared, this reason must be written for both to understand Zurab what's going on, to understand all members of parliament, and to understand for public. But they failed to do it in 3 hours. 3 hours, it's a classical time to give some first message. Sorry, Zurab wins in this case. Supervisory Board lost. And I think that we have a huge damage on trust. First, Kozak must be resigned. Second, this decision must be cancelled. And I think that, of course, we will not have this 100% trust in future, but if Supervisory Council will operate more or less transparent this year, it will be in some level, 70%, maybe something like that. It depends on how will they operate, especially in case of election period we have now. And in future, of course, as a co-author of this model of when we have 9 members from civil society and X members from parliament, but with the requirement that if you have more than 9 from parliament, you always must have +1 from civil society. I understand that we need also to increase this model, to make more safeguards in this model in the law. For example, one of the great ideas came from journalists of the UAPRC to provide a requirement in the law if you cancel head of supervisory board, if you resign him not in term, by such, for example, as now they claim that he is not violate something like that, supervisory board must be also cancelled at this moment. Sorry, you elect this person, you're responsible for this election.
So dissolve themselves.
Yeah.
Ivan.
I think what must happen is probably a repetition of the political experience that we already had in Ukraine. The biggest problem is that we cannot really say whether there was an honest vote against Zurab Alasania. And very interesting that 3 people voted against in a secret ballot, but already 4 people at least said that they voted against it. The main point is when you have more people claiming that they voted against something than the number of ballots, and there's something clearly wrong. Ukrainian political history knows how to deal with that. We had similar situation during the presidential elections in 2004. We couldn't establish in a second round who actually won the presidential elections. Okay, so we rerun the second round. We canceled the results of the second round, and we rerun it as a third round. Basically, this is something that I put as an offer yesterday. I said, okay, let's cancel that vote, do everything procedurally sound, and let's come again to the same issue. Let's make the same vote.
But open.
But openly, yeah, of course openly, because we are obliged by the law to do it this way. And once we have the results, then we will honor wherever result is coming. And if Zurab Alasania loses, then he loses. If he wins, then he stays.
But what's your opinion? What Igor said is that the supervisory board itself must dissolve itself, and we should restart the process.
If we fail to redo the process properly, then in my opinion, the entire supervisory board should resign or be dissolved involuntarily. We have to understand that this is one of the first experiences, both for the Ukrainian public and for the Ukrainian civil society and for the Ukrainian politics, of dealing with sophisticated governance that has supervisory board, managerial boards. I'm joking sometimes that every member of the supervisory board is first-generation supervisory board member, and every member of the managerial board is first-generation managerial board member.
No fathers, no grandfathers.
No fathers, no grandfathers, no 200 or 500 years of history before that could actually help us by giving us experience that we could reach out to. So in this sense, whatever happens, I think I would take it positively because it's becoming part of the experience. when a child is touching something sharp or something hot, or in other way, is discovering the surroundings, then it becomes the vital experience. And this is exactly what's happening. This is the vital experience that we're going through. We have to understand that we are fast learners. We have incredible learning curve, but we will have to go through things like this. We will have to go through crises like these, exactly because these crises are helping us to learn and to do better.
To wrap up the discussion, very brief comment of yours about the election. Do you think that there is a risk that all these changes will lead to more censorship on public broadcaster? Ihor? Or we sound, the civil society is rather sound, and media community is strong enough to counteract it?
I think that our civil society a little bit strong, especially after the revolution of dignity, to contradict some censorship things. Of course, it depends the level of adequate guys who can go to the power to do something like in our neighbors, unfortunately. But I'm quite sure that our civil society quite aggressive to contradict. Of course, there are a lot of risks.
Assertive, I would say.
Of course, one of the maybe biggest risks we faced came from the Roman Empire, divided impera. It unfortunately works even in civil society.
Civil society is more fragmented than 5 years ago.
It's one.
But you're
maybe
optimistic.
Huge risk.
Roman.
I'm also optimistic, but I'm not think that this is due to the strength of our civil society. I think that this is due to weakness of our government. I don't believe, unfortunately, that, though I really support all the changes that are going on in our country, but I don't, unfortunately, believe that our government is so democratic, so that it does not want to introduce censorship. No, I'm afraid that it is too weak to oppress freedom of speech.
And they have their own TV channels. Poroshenko has Premier and Fifth Channel. Why do he need?
Okay, but yes, they try to use at least this asset. But here, I also believe that civil society will finally protect the independence of public broadcaster. We really must save Zurab Alasania, and we must save the trust, and especially now in the eve of 2 elections. Because one of election, we have very fast approaching elections, presidential elections in March, and especially that's why we should keep the independence of public broadcaster now.
Okay, Yevhen, optimist?
I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic. I think we're first of all, I think we're going to win, and I think the reform will continue. Then, second of all, I don't think that this is a lost war. I think we are not. We shouldn't talk about every clash that we have, refer to it as to war. I think it's a battle. There are going to be many battles ahead of us. So we have to understand that this is a long process of transformation. It will last for years. It will last for electoral terms. It will last for generations. This is just one of them. So we are going to get done with this one, and we'll move to another one. That's how life works.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Roman Shutov, Ihor Roskladai, Yevhen Hlibovitsky. This was Hromadske International Sunday show in English. Our debate about public broadcaster in Ukraine and the events that took place 2 days ago, the sacking of Zurab Alasania. But we understand that the show goes on, and the story is not finished. So there will be process around it, the lawsuits, and maybe we'll have new surprise events next week. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. This is Hromadske in Kiev. My name is Volodymyr Yermolenko. Stay with us.